and welcome to the Everyday Board Game Podcast review. We're going to be reviewing a game here today. We're going to be reviewing Earth. Now, if you've never seen one of our reviews before, it's as unbiased as we can make it. We have 5 criteria for our podcast, for our top 8 debates, and for a lot of our other segments. We'll go over those as we're talking about the game, and we're going to rank it on a 1 to 5 scale for each me, Daniel, and this Daniel, as a possible 10 Daniel points for the game. Think of it as a 0 to 10 scale. Shall we begin?
Yeah, we shall.
Ease of play is our first production. How simple the game is to play, how familiar the mechanisms are, the likelihood to get to the table, and is it easy to learn, understand, or teach?
Yeah, so Earth is an interesting aspect for me on this one.
Okay.
The likelihood to get to the table, easy enough. Nature
Sure.
games play really well in my game groups. It is a beautiful, beautiful game. The art production on this, when we'll get to that later, is through the roof. So, yeah, it's going to be easy to get to the table. Is it easy to learn, understand, and teach? That's where I go him and haw about, because it is easy to a certain extent, but there are such a lot of moving parts in this one. But it is really easy to understand. I've taught it to two different groups, and everybody understood it. I taught it to Gamehead Geek. He's like, okay, it takes a couple plays as you're going through a round to be like, now I see how this works. If I do this, and I do this, and I do this. Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so it's like that's where I hem and haw. But honestly, 2 out of the 3 of our criteria I give it, because it is likelihood to get to the table. Mm-hmm. It's a very simple engine building style game. It does really well. The easy to teach, learn, and thing aspect for me personally does really well. It's just like there's a lot of moving parts, and there's a lot of iconography too. So people have to learn that as we're going, because there's iconography based on climate. There's iconography based on the plant type. There's iconography based on the animals out there. So yeah. It's a lot to learn, but yeah, no, I for me personally, I would give it ease of play.
Yeah. So, to let you guys know, in case you're not familiar with what Earth is, it's a tableau building game where you're going to be building a set of cards, 16 cards total, in rows of columns, and it's different kinds of plants and climates and fauna and all sorts of different things that you're going to be building out onto there, building effectively Earth, and you're using each of the different types of plants and different ecosystems to the advantage to get points in different ways. That's a very quick rundown. It is not a how to play, obviously.
No.
As far as ease of play, one of the biggest things that I've found with this game is, yes, it's daunting at first, and I have to go into that when I'm about to teach it. It's like, guys, this is going to look really intimidating, and it does look intimidating. But hear me out. Once we get a couple turns in, and you get familiar with a couple of the icons, it's going to be running really well. And you'll understand it pretty well. And I know this is true because I taught it to a few non-gamers at our local shop, and after maybe 20 minutes, a new player joined in, and they're like, hey, I'm willing to join in mid-game. Like, cool, you'll be down a few points, but that's fine. And one of the other players taught them directly. I didn't have to. So having only played it for about 30 minutes in, they were able to reteach the game in a pretty functional way. So I got to give it ease of play for learning how to teach, learning how to learn, likelihood to get to the table. And, even though it is kind of a big sprawling game, I feel like because of the fact that there's only 4 different actions and everyone chooses one, or one player chooses one, gets the bigger part, and everyone else gets the smaller part, that's not a difficult idea.
No, not at all.
Just how to follow that action. So I give it ease of play as well.
All right, so that right now is 2 Daniels.
Yeah, it's 2 Daniel points. Let's talk about replay value, and this breaks down into the length of time and how well does it scale per player.
So for me, when it comes to the replay value, this is a hands down a Daniel for me, just for the simple fact it can go a little long. So this is probably where I would give it a knock if I was going to give it on this one, because the 2-player game I played with it went a lot faster than the 4 and 3-player game I played with it. But the minimum number of plays for the full experience, the plethora of cards, we had multiple decks basically set up. There was one for one side of the table and another for the other side of the table, and we still didn't even go through half the cards in the day, because you're basically just building a 4x4 16 card tableau, what you're trying to do, and score your points off that. And I'm tucking cards left and right. I had a nice little tucking engine going, and we still didn't even go through half the cards in that deck. I still haven't seen every single card in this game, and I've played it multiple times. So I minimum number of plays for the full experience. It's going to get a nice little knock. And they just announced, in one of our things about expandability is if they have already existing expansions,
Yep.
Up to one expansion that we think that are coming out, or if the publisher or designers have announced an expansion. Guess what? They are coming out with an expansion on Earth Day this year on Kickstarter. So if you missed out on the original Kickstarter for it, you can pick it up. And so yeah, they have the announce it 2 out of 3 once again for me. So I will give it replay value.
Yeah, and then the other categories is minimum number of plays for the full experience and the expandability. Now, this is a very new game. It just came out last year, I believe, or maybe late, like a year and a half ago.
Late last year.
It was very, very recent that this game came out. So it's not expected to be expandable yet. But the fact is that when I choose the big action, everyone is engaged on their turn. That scales really well. This game can be played realistically in under an hour.
Yes.
If everyone knows what they're doing, even if it's a bigger game, like 4 or 5 players, this very well still can be played in an hour, which is amazing for a game to this capacity.
Yeah.
All the other games that are comparable like Everdell, Wingspan, all those, they don't play in an hour. That's not, anybody who tells you that is lying to you. This really does. So I would give this a Daniel as well.
Yeah, and so like when you're talking about like the other games, Wingspan and stuff like that, who's telling you play those under an hour? If you're playing 2 players,
The same people who claim Wingspan is a gateway game. That's who. It's shameful.
2 players,
Shameful.
maybe, but
Maybe.
everything else you can play this. I think we played a 3-player game in like 45 minutes, but we're all very familiar with this.
Yep.
Honestly, another thing, when we'll talk about it when we get to other bits of it, this is a game that you could teach to non-gamers really easily when we talk about ease of play. Wingspan is not.
Right, exactly. All right, let's go on to meaningful choice. The 3 sub-criteria are impacting other players' strategies.
Yeah, that's more along the lines of like, is a choice you make impact him? Worker placements is a good spot of this one. Is like, I can block a spot for you by going there.
Yep. And,
Depth of strategy, tactics, or skills.
and then that explains basically, how can you respond to each of the plays, whether it's tactically, and dexterity games count under that as well for skills. Do arbitrary choices or analysis paralysis impact the gameplay? Since what you do doesn't entirely affect other players, it can, but mostly you're playing solo. It doesn't really matter. But there is some very clear cards that when you are partway through the game, you can have a defined strategy that you can go off of. And even though at the beginning all of them are good cards, halfway through the game you have some very clear-cut choices that you're going to have to make, because a lot of times you have to discard cards in order to justify paying for others, and that's a hard decision.
Yeah. And so for me, when it comes to like the meaningful choice aspect of this game, when we were talking about impacting other player strategy, you can impact other player strategies based on like, if I plant right now, I have enough to plant this card, but I have a better card here.
Yep.
Maybe I should go over here and get soil. That is probably what my friend like Angel is waiting for, because he needs to get soil into his thing. So it's like, you're trying to take a look at what everybody's trying to do.
Yep.
You're also trying to look at their tableau to see what's going to be activated. Like if I go here,
Right,
then they
which
get
action they're going to pick.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, if they're going to go there, then why would I go there? Maybe I should do this action instead, because I think more than likely they're going to go there. And so it's that you're thinking about other people's strategy as well. And so when we go to the depth of the strategy aspect of it, you're thinking about your moves as well as their moves. Is like, if they're going to go there, then let me do some watering, put some sprouts over here. This way, if he does go there, I have these things where I can use for my engine to basically discard these sprouts to help fire off things I need to get more points.
Yep.
So it's just that interesting push and pull. And honestly, it plays so fast, there's not really too much AP aspect on it. There can be arbitrary choices in a sense, basically just by the cards coming up, but also it's just, you're sitting there like, well, I really don't need this card, so now this is just a compost pile card for me. So like if I got to drop one out of my hand, I'll put this one because I don't need it. So I would give meaningful choice to it.
Absolutely, I agree. That's 2 more Daniel points. On to our next one, game immersion. And that is the game fun to lose? Is there player interaction like table talk role playing and memorable moments?
So for me, this is another one that it doesn't get the full game immersion aspect of it. Really, the player interaction's kind of there, but at times when I was playing it with the new group, when I was playing it with us, we're just kind of like, what'd you do? Okay, now I'm going to do this, this, and this, and this. But it plays so quick, you don't really notice that player interaction and that table talking. But is the game fun to lose? Yes. By far, this is one of my favorite games to play, and I don't do really well at it because I'm always trying, like, can I do this engine, or can I do this engine, or do this or that? I'm always trying to find these little, like, combos that work really well. And a lot of times you're lucky and beholden to the draw of the cards. So yeah, but you're still having a good time because you're trying to puzzle out how best it's going to work for you. In those memorable moments, it has it in scores because you're sitting there like, oh, if I do this and then this happens, then I trigger this. Okay, now this will allow me to get these. Then I can use it when I do this, and that allows me to tuck those and do all these little different things. So when your engine starts firing off, you're like, oh, yes, I got to take this action. Ooh, they took the action for me, so I get to fire all this off, and now I get to do a better action later on, or I get to fire all these other different cards, which allow me to feed this action. Yeah, no. This is another Daniel for me.
Okay. I agree with you on player interaction. It doesn't have player interaction. The memorable moments are definitely there. It was so much to the point where I even sent you a picture of a play that I did.
Mm-hmm.
And I rarely do that. It's almost never, but I was very, very gratified on it.
And you still lost the game.
As far as it's fun to lose, I mean, it does have an aspect of being fun to lose, but, and you feel clever, but I don't think I give it that point. Just because, like, if you lose just because you're like, oh man, I didn't play my strategy well enough, I don't feel like you were still immersed in the theme of the game. I don't feel like you were immersed in the actions of the others. And I don't like it where it's like, no matter how good I did, the other players, like, they just did a solo game better than me. You know, I'm not going to give it a Daniel for this.
Okay, that's fine. For me, the fun to lose aspect of it is because it is fun. Because I still think about, like, when I just recently played it this past Saturday, I'm like, what could I done better to make this engine work better? And when it makes me start thinking after I play the game, for me that's fun to lose because it just lets me play things again in my mind.
Cool. And the final category is art and production. This is talking about art, pieces and components, and the graphic design.
And this is very subjective here. So your difference is going to be a little bit different. We had a whole big conversation this with our friend Dammit Dom. So people with the podcast will know that reference where he would rather have drawn art rather than photo art. There was a big discussion about that. So again, this is very subjective. I
blatantly said that he was anti-photo, and he claimed that photography was not art. And I called him out on that. No,
I left the room to go get water.
I think it's a beautiful game. The art on it is, you're gonna know whether you like the photo realism of it or not.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's pretty. I mean, it's a reason why they have real photos on like desktops on like computers and stuff. Like, of course, they're pretty photos. That doesn't mean that you can't like it. The pieces and components, I know we'll come back to that because I know you have a knock on it. The graphic design is almost perfect, except for one little part, is that the boards and the cards were printed at slightly different shades of different colors, therefore making the actions a little bit harder to follow. Now, the publisher did address that when I spoke with him last year, and he did say, he was like, yeah, and he actually started picking our brain because I was colorblind, and he was like, how is this? Like, how does this work for you? And they added design background to it, but unfortunately it just wasn't clear enough, so it wasn't as easy to see. I do believe in later editions he has corrected that.
Yeah. My edition,
I don't know for sure. But the older editions, the graphic design as far as the actions on the card versus the actions on the player boards, those are a little questionable. But that is the only minor knock. The iconography is good. There is quite a lot of it, but one of our friends did have a minor argument against that, and that's when you compost cards from the deck. It has a little arrow that's in a circle. That's kind of synonymously known throughout the board game community as a redo or replay or reroll or whatever. That would be like redrawing cards, as most people would see it. And that icon was a little weird. But other than that, I didn't have a problem with the icons.
So, as beautiful as I think this game is... Mm-hmm. Oh, so by the way, are you giving it a Daniel or not?
I'm giving this a Daniel.
Yeah. As beautiful as I think this game is... I have a couple knocks when it comes to after just recently playing it. First off, the art is phenomenal. I will give it a point just on that art alone.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the pieces and components, they're really nice. I like what they're doing. My issue with that is, for one thing, you made the player colors the same thing as the tree tops or the canopy tops is what they're called. And so the way I packed it, I thought they were the player colors. I'm like, okay, I'm missing the orange ones, I guess.
Yep.
No, they're basically like the wingspan eggs. They're just a group color and however you want to do. And the other issue I have with this game is they don't stack as well as they should when you get to some of the cards that have large stacks. I just recently played it. My friend she had the bamboo, and it's basically 8 stacks high. She had to do a stack of 4 and the stack of 4, because when she hit a 5th or 6th stack, it just fell over. So they don't stand like they're supposed to be. And if you're going to have these big stack of stuff, the pieces are great, but if they're not working properly, then it's a knock for me. And the green cubes are just green cubes, which is fine. All fine. The components quality is great, but the way they're supposed to work, I can't give it a point just on that one, because there are some that have like giant stacks, and if it's going to be falling over, then what's the point of that aspect of it? And then my other knock to it, and that's why I will not give it a Daniel on art and production, even though I think it's a very gorgeous game, is that graphic design. Yes, they said they have altered it and they made it better, but my version and the one that we have and have played, I can't see the green colors. That you could see that there's a little bit of design in there. I had to take the flashlight from my phone and hover over it, and I'm like, oh, there is the design. And then I had to go look for a card that has it and try to find that design. So there was a bit of an issue there. Maybe I'll give that point somewhere down the line if I can get a better copy of the cards or something along that lines. But as of right now, the graphic design aspect of it, it's tough for me as a colorblind person to give it good graphic design. So as much as it pains me to say, I can't give it art and production.
So you heard it here. This brings in a grand total of 8 out of 10 Daniel points. So 8 out of 10 still gets our seal of approval.
Oh, yeah.
Seal of excellence. Amazing game. Hopefully you've enjoyed this review from Everyday Board Games. And if you like what we do, check out our YouTube channel, check out our Twitch, and come join us on future episodes.
And listen to all audio podcasts on most podcast platforms.
Thank you for tuning in.